Okay, the clock has struck 6 p.m. Thank you to everybody that's hopping on. Got a great turnout tonight. I had 64 people signed up for this webinar, so excited about how much interest we've have in the rules. Tonight's topic is going to be, as you can see by the title, Rules of Golf on the new blue and some other rules concepts. We're not going to get too specific about the new course. One, there's certain things that really haven't been decided in terms of how things are going to be marked and things of that nature, but also none of us have played it, so it's hard to give any sort of context for some of the more specific things. But we are going to talk about what I think are going to be some of the bigger issues that we might run into out there, and then a couple other things as well. So just a couple reminders before we get into it. Please use the chat function or the Q&A function if you do have questions. I'm going to try and answer any questions that come along as they're asked, but just in terms of time sensitivity, if something looks a little more complicated, I may save it for the end. But happy to stay on as long as people have questions that we'd be happy to answer. Technical support, if for some reason Zoom is giving you trouble or anything, Chris Nieto is our tech support guy tonight. So you can shoot him an email. That's his email there, cnieto@ccclub.org. We're going to have 4 quiz questions. This is something new. I think I've done 2 or 3 of these rules webinars over the last year for the membership. And something I picked up while doing the USGA rules workshop 2 weeks ago is this live polling system. It's on menti.com. So if you have your phone handy or a computer, when we get to the question, there's going to be a 5 or 6 digit code that you'll put in on Menti, and you'll be able to answer the question, and we'll see everybody's live results for those questions. I think that'll be a fun way to get some interaction as well. Without further ado, let's get into it. So talking about the new blue course, one of the top 3 comments that we're getting as well, it looks like there's a lot of bunkers out there, which there are. There's still, some of them are being built. Obviously, hole 6 still has some work to do, so we don't know the total number of bunkers yet. That has been a popular trivia question that folks have asked, but it's definitely something that we're all going to end up in a bunker or 2, or maybe 10 or 15 when we're out there playing on the new blue. So I wanted to get into the details of the bunkers. You can see the themes here, understanding when your ball is in a bunker, things you're allowed to do in a bunker, things you're not allowed to do in a bunker. Abnormal ground condition relief, we'll get into that when we get to it, but just there's certain things in a bunker that you're allowed to get relief from. How do you get relief from them? Where can you drop your ball? And then Raking Reminder is actually, it's a shameless plug for just care of the course. And we'll get into that when we get to that bullet point. So is your ball in the bunker? Got the diagram here. But your ball is in the bunker when any part of it touches the bunker. But you can see if there's a dirt face, which we're not going to have on the blue course, but there's mostly, if it's a grass face of the bunker, your ball is on the grass, it's not in the bunker. If there's an island or a tongue that juts out into the bunker of grass and your ball rests on that, it's not in the bunker. But if it rests on, you see the rake there, if it rests on what we're going to call a movable obstruction that's inside the bunker, it is in the bunker. So all the rules that apply for bunkers apply towards your ball during that scenario. What are the allowed actions? What can we do when our ball is in the bunker? So the rules say before playing your ball in a bunker, you may remove loose impediments and movable obstructions. Okay, so what are loose impediments and what's the difference between that and a movable obstruction? This is a change as of January 1st, 2019. Prior to that, you could not move loose impediments in a bunker. And loose impediments are natural objects that are easily moved. So common things that we'd see in a bunker would be twigs, stones, pine cones, leaves. And you are now, there doesn't need to be any sort of special local rule in effect. You can now pick those loose impediments up out of the sand and remove those when your ball's in the bunker. The difference between loose impediments and movable obstructions is, besides the fact that movable obstructions are not artificial, not natural. So the rake in that prior diagram, that is a movable obstruction. A Coke can, if for some reason there was a lost club that was lying in the bunker that belonged to somebody else, that would be a movable obstruction. When you move loose impediments, your ball can't move. If it does move, you're going to be penalized. You're going to have to replace your ball where it originally lay. When you're moving movable obstructions, your ball can move and you can replace the ball with no penalty. So just, people are eager now that they know, hey, I can move stones, I can move rocks. When I get into the bunker, just be careful. There's a certain risk there. When you do move those loose impediments, those natural objects, your ball can't move. So you just have to take extra care as opposed to moving a movable obstruction. A great example that I think of that happens a lot is your ball is in a bunker on a slope and the rake was thrown and your rake caught the ball. So basically the rake is keeping the ball from rolling all the way down the hill. It's impossible for you to move the rake without your ball moving down, or I should say highly unlikely. And most of us, when playing golf, we've known that we can just pick the rake up and put the ball back where it was. And that is perfectly acceptable for any sort of movable obstruction. But if it were a twig or something, or let's say a large stick that was holding our ball on that slope, we can try and move it, but if our ball moves at all, we're going to be penalized. I got a great question here. What is if your ball is on top of a leaf or a twig? So a leaf or a twig, as long as they're not attached to anything, those are loose impediments. So if your ball is on top of those items, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to move the leaf or twig without your ball moving. So you're probably going to be out of luck in that scenario, and you're just going to have to play your ball as it lies. You're not going to want to take that risk of trying to move that object because it's most likely going to cause your ball to move, and you'll be assessed a one-stroke penalty. If your ball is lying on a movable obstruction like the rake, you can pick the ball up, you can move the rake, and then you can place that ball back where it was. Great question. Some additional allowed, well, actually, I'm going to get into things that you cannot do. So you cannot deliberately touch the sand in the bunker with your hand, club, rake, or any other object to test the conditions of the sand. Most of us know this. We're all told we can't ground our club in the bunker, meaning we can't touch the sand with the club before we take our downswing. I can't do that during a practice swing, and you also can't do it when you're making the backswing of your shot. If you brush the sand, you're now in violation of that rule. Now, there's some exceptions here. This would go back under the allowed action. Exceptions on when you are allowed to touch the sand. You can touch the sand when you're digging your feet in to take a stance. You can touch the sand when you're smoothing the bunker for care of the course. Now, you got to be careful with that one, because if you're smoothing sand and your ball's in the bunker, it's possible that you could end up improving your lie or improving the direction that you're supposed to hit the ball. So if there's some footprints that are in the bunker and your ball's in there, it's a bummer that someone didn't rake it beforehand, but you're going to be better off just hitting your shot and then raking those footprints when you're done. Another way to touch the sand is if you're measuring, marking, lifting, or replacing your ball. So an example of this would be if two players hit their ball in a bunker and they're really close together, and one ball is going to interfere with, or they're both going to interfere with each other's play. There's an ability in the rules for one player to mark the location of their ball, pick it up, and the other player can play their shot, and then the player who picked their ball up can recreate the lie. So if it was manicured or raked beforehand, before the other player hit, they can rake it, put the ball back. And in that case, because they're marking the spot of the ball, they would be allowed to touch the sand in that case. Also, you can lean up against the club to rest or stay balanced or prevent from falling. So this is something I don't really see a lot, but it's written in the rules. If your playing partner is also in the bunker and your ball is nowhere near where you are and you're just waiting for them to hit, you can lean up on your club, support yourself, and rest in the bunker. As long as you're not anywhere near your ball and you're not going to improve the lie of your ball, you're not doing it to test the ground, and you would be allowed to do that. Abnormal ground condition. Got a couple questions here. Can you take the rake and drop it in the bunker with you? Yes, you can do that. That would be an area where you could touch the sand. You just got to be, again, when you're in there, when you're touching the sand, you got to make sure that you're not improving the area around your ball or the direction that you're going to hit your ball. So that would be an allowed activity, is dropping the rake in the bunker. You see that a lot. We actually encourage that just for pace of play. Hey, grab the rake on your way into the bunker so that you don't have to go back and get it after you've hit your shot. The abnormal ground condition relief option. So what the heck is an abnormal ground condition? Examples of that would be things like an animal hole, ground under repair, an immovable obstruction. An example of an immovable obstruction in a bunker would be like maybe some stairs. There's a lot of courses that have steps to get down into bunkers, and you can't, it's not a natural thing, right? So it's an obstruction, but it's not easily moved. So it's classified in a different category from movable obstruction. Or temporary water. Temporary water is a fairly new term. Most of us probably know it as casual water. And when the rules dramatically changed January 1st to 2019, they changed the terminology there. But if there's water in the bunker that's not normally there, which is what temporary water is, and your ball is near it, you can get relief from it. The key here, I'm going to pull this next graphic up. There we go. Oh. So you can see my puddle there, my ball is in the bunker. That's my abnormal ground condition. And I've got a couple different options to my, well, excuse me, I have one option in turn to, and I must drop it in the bunker for free relief. So you get free relief from abnormal ground conditions. And you can see my relief area there. I take one club length and I must drop it in the bunker. New as of 2019, there is now an option when you're getting relief from an abnormal ground condition where you can actually drop it outside of the bunker. It's not free relief. It's going to cost you a penalty stroke, but it's called back of the line relief. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in more detail, but you can see from this diagram, if I'm taking back of the line relief to get out of a bunker in an abnormal ground condition scenario, I'm going to draw an imaginary line. That's what that dotted line is between where my ball lies and the hole. And I can go back on that line as far as I want outside the bunker and drop it within one club length of that spot, that reference point. And I'm going to assess myself a one-stroke penalty. So that's a very, it's probably not been used too much. Most of you probably have not heard that change before. So that is, again, it's a nice benefit if you're someone that is not very confident out of the bunker, you think, hey, it may take me 3 shots to hit it out of the bunker, I might be better off just taking my ball out of the water and going back out of the bunker and taking that shot and risking that. That's going to be a better option for me. So that's going to be the player's choice, but that is a fairly new concept with the rules. Lastly, my raking reminder. See a lot of people when they're raking the sand after they've hit a shot, they pull the rake towards them. And what happens there is the sand starts to actually pile up and you don't get a nice flat surface. So if you talk to a Congressional member, Mike Cowan, he's going to tell you to push the sand away from you. And that's going to allow the sand to naturally fall. You get a much cleaner, flatter surface there. Got a couple questions about bunkers. One was about an unraked footprint. Again, unfortunately, well, that's not an abnormal ground condition. That's just someone, unfortunately, not being very courteous. And you're going to be out of luck if your ball ends up near in an unraked footprint. You're just going to have to play that as it lies, which is too bad. Next question is, what if temporary water covers all of the bunker and the only place to get complete relief is outside of the bunker? Great question. I'm going to read exactly what the rules say with that as it relates to, where is it, 16.1c. So this is rule 16 is the abnormal ground condition rule. And as it relates to bunkers, so if there is no such nearest point of relief in the bunker, the player may still take this relief by using the point of maximum available relief in the bunker as a reference point. Okay, so what that means is, say the whole thing is filled with water, you're going to go to the place that has the least amount of water or the shallowest water in the bunker, and that's where you're going to drop. Now, a committee may say before a tournament, all the bunkers on the 6th hole are completely washed out underwater, and they're going to mark those as ground under repair and give you that option so they don't put you through that. But if you're in a scenario where there's so much water in the bunker that you can't get full relief from the water, you just have to take what the rules call maximum relief. So that is, again, if you're playing in a situation like that and it's a tournament, hopefully the committee has already thought through that scenario, but that's what you would do if that has not been deemed ground under repair. The next question is relief from abnormal ground condition in a bunker mandatory? No, it's absolutely not mandatory. Unless it's some sort of mandatory ground under repair that you have to take relief from, and that would be defined by the committee. You're more than welcome if you feel like, hey, I don't want to risk, I feel like I can hit this shot out of the water, this little puddle. I don't want to risk dropping my ball in the bunker. Maybe I'm going to get a plug lie. That is your option. You can just play it as it lies. And as the player, you're going to have to make that decision. Great questions. I love the interaction here. Okay, we've got our first Menti question. So Menti.com, that is going to be the 7-digit code you're going to put in the box when you get up there. The question is, a player touches the sand when moving a pine cone from near the ball. The ball doesn't move. What must the player do? Answer A, take the general penalty for touching the sand. B, proceed with no penalty. And C, take a 1-stroke penalty for touching the sand. So I'm going to give everybody 10 seconds or so to maybe read that through again, pull up the app, formulate your answer, and then I'm going to pull it up on the screen and we'll get a sense of what everyone's thinking here. Give everyone one more minute or one more second. Okay, we have 9 responses so far. And it looks like the favorite is B, proceed with no penalty. That is correct. So a little tricky here. Now, the ball did not, this was a loose impediment. That's what a pine cone is. And you are allowed under the rules to move that. And you are allowed to touch the sand in that action because that's an allowed action under the rules. However, the ball can't move. So because in this scenario, the ball didn't move and we were doing something that was allowed under the rules, the fact that we touched the sand is okay. Again, as long as it doesn't cause the ball to move or improve the lie of the ball, meaning if you were to touch the pine cone and somehow improve the way the sand was around the ball, it's unlikely that that would happen. But if you were to improve the lie, then you would be subject to penalty. So I'm glad that people were able to get on there and answer that. Let's hop back to the presentation. Okay. All right, penalty areas. This is another area that you're going to see some of on the blue course. I wanted to talk about what penalty areas are because that's a very new term in golf. And also talk about where they're going to be on the blue course and this concept of red versus yellow. There's 2 different types of penalty areas and we have different options. So just first getting into what are penalty areas, you see I wrote no more water hazards. The term water hazard is now extinct from the rules of golf as of January 2019. You're going to hear me say January 2019 a lot because obviously there's been a lot of changes since then. But what is a penalty area? Why did the USGA decide to make that change? Well, a penalty area is defined in the rules as any body of water on the course, including sea, lake, pond, river, ditch, drainage area, or other open water source. Now, that is pretty much what the definition of a water hazard was. But there's a second bullet point here that says it's also any other part of the course that the committee deems a penalty area. Okay, so before, because the definition was so dependent on water being present, there was a lot of areas on golf courses where the committee didn't really have an option to declare it anything other than out of bounds. And it would be an area where it's not really out of bounds, it's on the course, but if a player hits their ball in there, they're unlikely to find it and they're going to end up having to go back to the tee and take a lost ball. An example of this would be a heavy fescue area or a heavily wooded area that's not necessarily out of bounds. The committee now, even though there's no water present, can make it a penalty area, and now they're giving the player an option other than going back to the tee when they hit their ball in there. So that is the textbook definition of or reasoning behind why penalty area is now the term that we use, and they're taking water out of the definition or the reason that an area needs to be marked that way. Now we've got 2 water, or yeah, there you go. I just said water hazards. We've got 2 different types of penalty areas. One is red, marked with red paint. One's marked with yellow. The biggest difference, and they used to be called just water hazard for yellow and lateral water hazard for red. And the way that the red, I'm going to say penalty area is defined is that it was a body of water, or in this case, some place that the committee has determined you can't really hit out of. And it's not really practical to drop behind it, because that's a big part of the yellow penalty area, is that you have to drop from behind the body of water. I've got a picture here of our new 10th hole. It's actually, this is an older picture. All the tee boxes have been sodded in now, so it's looking like you could go play it. It's really exciting. It's not very long, but it's going to be pretty difficult, especially on a windy day like it was today. So you can see the edge of the water, and play is really happening along the water's edge, not over the water, even though you do have to hit partially over the water to get to the green. So if we were to mark that as yellow, it takes a lot of the player's decision out of place. It's not really practical all along this riverbank or this water bank to drop behind it. So this would be an area where we would mark that red, because that's going to give the player the option to drop laterally. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm going to pull up, this is the relief for a yellow penalty area. So you can see, again, the big difference with the yellow penalty area is that it's very easy to drop behind it. So the player must hit over this lake to get to the green, does not successfully do that, hits it in the yellow penalty area. They have two options. Option number one is what we call stroke and distance. They can simply drop from the spot that they hit the shot into the penalty area, and it's one penalty stroke, and then they can attempt to go over the water again towards the green. So stroke and distance is option number one. Option number two is this back of the line relief, which we saw with the abnormal ground condition in the bunker. So we've got the spot, see the X there, that is defined as the point that the ball entered the penalty area. So unlike the abnormal ground condition scenario in the bunker, where we were drawing a line between where the ball was and the hole, under the penalty area rule, we don't necessarily know exactly where the ball lies. If it's a big lake, we just know it crossed the yellow line at a certain point, but we can't see it. It's murky water. So for that reason, we're going to do it based on the point that it crossed the line. And we're going to draw a line between that and the hole, and we can go back as far as we want on that line within one club length on either side and drop and play from there. Now we've got our red penalty area, which we're going to see on hole 10 here in a few short months. So we're going to get the two same options that we got with yellow penalty areas. So I see option one, she was playing from the tee, hit it into the red penalty area. She can now just looks like she played from the teeing area. You can see those two tee markers. So she can go under stroke and distance and just replay the shot from where she played it previously. Option two is that back of the line relief. You can see we've got the line between the hole and where the ball crossed, and she's got to go back on that line. In this case, it's probably not her best option because she's got to go onto the other side of the water, because that's where that line takes her. And then we've got this third option, which is the lateral option. So she can take from the X mark where the ball crossed the line, she can take 2 club lengths and drop within that area. So that's that third lateral option. The blue course specifics, I just wanted to talk about where the penalty areas are going to be. There might be a couple more that we define. Again, the course isn't finished, so we haven't gotten a chance to really get out there and see what makes sense. But hole 6, the water on the right side of that hole, the large mounds that, if you remember, you couldn't really see the water that ran alongside the hole from the tee box or from the hole because those mounds were in the way. Those mounds are going away to allow water to drain more easily into the ponds. So that is going to be a red, most likely a red penalty area, because it runs along parallel with that whole hole, so you can't drop behind it. The hole 10 we've already seen, that's going to be most likely red penalty area. Hole 11, there's no longer the pond to the right of the green. The green is now on the other side of where that pond was. So for those of you that haven't been out there yet, Andrew Green created a second fairway on the right side of where the stream was that went all the way down the hole, and you're gonna now hit either for your second shot or your third shot, depending on how you choose to play the hole. You're gonna hit over the water to get to the green instead of the water just running alongside that hole. So that we still haven't made a determination. I think most likely it'll probably be red all the way, just because it's a continuous body of water and it runs along the hole most of the way. So I think that's probably going to make the most sense. It's just to keep it. It can get confusing if you have a body of water that has, part of it is red and part of it is yellow. It just makes the player a little more. It just adds a little more ambiguity. The rules are hard enough to navigate as is, so try and keep it as simple as possible. And then hole 14 and 18, you've probably seen it if you looked at hole 18 from the clubhouse, but on the left side, there's that, it's grass, but it's a ditch. Hasn't been fully decided yet, but I think that we're going to end up classifying that, and there's a similar ditch on the left side of 14 as penalty areas. Jason FT and I were actually looking at Oakmont. They have very similar ditches, and those are all, when they play the US Open there, they classify those as red penalty areas. So I think we're going to do something similar. Got a question here. Is the opposite side lateral drop still available from a red hazard? So that's a great question. For those of you that don't understand the context there, in the old rules, when I say the old rules, I mean prior to January 1, 2019, there was an additional option when you had a red water hazard where you could drop on the other side of the hazard that your ball crossed from, as long as you were an equal distance from the hole. So let me go back to our chart here. So the X is where the ball crossed. Under the old rules, the player would have another option where they could go to the other side of the water to a spot that was the same distance from the hole as where that X is, and give themselves 2 club lengths from there. That option is no longer available in the rules. That was one that was taken away. Great question. Okay, we got another Menti question coming up here. This one's a little wordy, so we'll go through it slowly and then I'll give you a chance to answer it. On a par 3 hole, a player hits from the teeing area across water, marked as a yellow penalty area. The shot goes into a bunker behind the putting green. The player then makes a stroke from the bunker and the ball comes to rest in the penalty area in front of the putting green. What is the ruling? A, the player may drop a ball in the bunker under penalty of stroke and distance. B, the player may drop a ball within 2 club lengths of where the ball last crossed the edge of the penalty area, not near the hole. Or C, the player must drop a ball on the teeing area side of the water, taking relief under the yellow penalty area relief rule. So the player hits from the tee, goes over the green into a bunker. The green has a yellow penalty area in front of it. Then for their next shot, they play from the bunker and it goes over the green into the yellow penalty area. So we have 3 options here. What is the ruling? What is the correct way to proceed? Give you about 10 seconds before I pull up the live results here. Maybe a couple extra seconds. This is a wordy one. I had to think about this one. Okay, let's pull up the results. Okay, we had a split field here. All right, so we had 5 for the player may drop a ball in the bunker. 5 for the player may drop a ball within 2 club lengths of where the ball last crossed the penalty area. And C, the player must drop a ball on the teeing area side of the water. Okay, so the correct answer is A. The player may drop a ball in the bunker under penalty of stroke and distance. So if you go back to our diagram with the yellow penalty area, there are 2 options. Option 1 is stroke and distance. That's where you go and you play from where you just played. Option 2 is back of the line relief from behind the penalty area. So answer B does not apply here because it's a red penalty area. It's not a red penalty area. That the 2 club lengths where the ball last crossed, that's only available if the penalty area was red. And then for C, the reason that's not correct is that it says the player must drop a ball on the teeing area side of the water. So that's where the rules will trip you up a little bit. May versus must. Must implies that that's the player's only option. May applies, which in this case, with the yellow penalty area, we have 2 options. So the word must there was the red herring, 3 off. Okay, got a question here. All right, I have a couple people that have raised their hand. Mr. Garg, I'm gonna put you off mute here. Do you have a question? Hello, Mr. Garg, I just unmuted you. Did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. It said you raised your hand.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to.
Okay. All right, we can move right along here. Oh. All right, so we're gonna move away from the blue core stuff. Gonna talk about when the ball moves, what to do. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is unplayable eyes. So ball at rest, lifted or moved. The first thing is, did the ball move? What is the, under the definitions of the rules, how does the rules define movement of the ball? So I'm going to read exactly what it says here. All right. So the ball moves when it leaves its position and ends up in another position. I know that sounds a little silly, but essentially the reason there's that distinction when it leaves one place and goes to another is because if the ball were to move but then return to its original position, technically under the rules that does not qualify as moved. So you wouldn't have to worry about anything if that were the case. That doesn't happen very often, but that is just the way the rules define it. And there's 4 areas in the rules that basically 4 things that can cause the ball to move. So it's natural forces, the player, which includes the player's caddy. Player's caddy and the player have similar status as it relates to the ball moving. The opponent, which is only in match play, and an outside influence. So we'll talk about those 4 areas here. Natural forces. Those are defined as in the rules as such as wind, water, or when something happens for no apparent reason because of the effects of gravity. You gotta love that. So this doesn't happen too often anywhere besides the putting green, really. But we've all been in a situation where we get up, our ball seems to have stopped, then we get up to it and we're nowhere near it. We can't have caused it to move, and suddenly gravity takes over, or there's a big gust of wind and the ball starts to roll. So what do we do? Well, there's no penalty, so that's good news. and the ball must be played from its new spot. However, there is an exception here, and this is new as of January 2019. If your ball is on the putting green and you've already lifted and replaced it, like you've already marked it, cleaned it, put it back, you walk away, you're maybe on the other side trying to read the putt, and it starts to move, then because you've already done that action of marking it and then replacing it, you would actually pick the ball up and put it back where it was. So the only time you put it back is if you've already marked it and you're on the putting green. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, that is before, it doesn't matter if you had marked it or not. Wherever it ended up due to natural forces, you just play it from there. And so just something to be aware of when you're on the putting green. It's just if you marked your ball already, that should be the trigger that if your ball moves at that point, you're putting it back. All right, what happens if the player, so you as the player or your caddy, move the ball? The ball has to be replaced, and it's a one-stroke penalty. If we cause our ball to move and we don't replace it, we're actually going to get penalized 2 strokes for playing from the wrong place. So that's really important. If you move your ball, make sure you put it back. I have a question about natural forces here, so hold on one second. Can natural forces take place after a player has addressed the ball but not grounded the club? So actually, we're going to talk about accidental movement on the putting green, so I'm going to hold off on answering that for 1 second here. But the notable exception, so when the player moves the ball or causes the ball to move but does not get penalized, one option is when you're during search. So if you're attempting to find or identify your ball and you move it by accident, you are in the act of searching, you are not penalized, but you must replace the ball where it was. The other one is accidental movement on the putting green. So that question that I just read, can natural forces take place after the player has addressed the ball but not grounded the club? I don't know if anyone remembers, I think it was not the most recent Open at the old course, but the previous one to that. It was really windy one day, and there was a lot, they ended up postponing the round because of how windy it was. But what you saw was that people were afraid, the players were not putting their putter down on the ground, because if they grounded their club behind the ball and then the wind moved it, they would be penalized. The rules have been changed a couple of times since then, but because of this accidental movement rule, determining whether it was natural forces or the player caused the ball to move after you've addressed the ball, it's not as important anymore, because any accidental movement of the ball by the player on the putting green is no penalty. And you just put the ball back where it was. Remember when Dustin Johnson won the US Open at Oakmont, I forget what hole he was on, but there was that slow-mo of the ball just subtly moving, and he was kind of off to the side. And there was all this controversy because it took them forever to determine whether his actions caused the ball to move. And that is no longer, because one of the main reasons for this change with the accidental movement is because of that whole situation where he didn't gain any advantage. Nothing he was doing was intentional. And so someone just said 5th hole at Oakmont. Yeah, I think, I honestly don't remember what hole it was, but yeah, the Dustin Johnson scenario was a big reason why you as a player are not able to or not going to be penalized when you cause your ball to move by accident. Hopefully that answers that question, Mr. Emmerich there. Another one, if the ball comes to rest and then it falls into the cup without ever being marked due to wind, do you replace it? So no, as long as you have not marked that ball on the putting green, You walk up to it, the wind blows it, and it goes into the cup. Congratulations. Whatever that shot that you hit to get the ball on the green, that was your last shot on that hole. But if you had marked the ball and then you put it back and then a wind blew it into the hole, unfortunately, in that case, you would have to pick the ball up out of the hole and put it back where it was. The last exception here that I'll mention in terms of when a player is not going to be penalized for moving their ball is while applying a rule that allows you to touch the ball. So we talked about moving a movable obstruction, the bunker rake. When you're marking the spot of the ball when allowed to do so, say your ball's on the fringe and it's in the way of somebody else and they've asked you to mark it and get it out of the way. Or if you're taking relief from a cart path and you're picking up the ball, then you're allowed to move it under that because you're utilizing a rule that allows you to move the ball. The opponent in match play, ball's got to be replaced if the opponent moves it. Some exceptions here, if they move the ball because of conceding a stroke, hole, or match, or at the player's request. So if someone hits a putt and it's 2 feet away, the opponent can pick the ball up and say, hey, your next one's good, and just toss it back to them. However, if your opponent moves it, they're going to get that 1-stroke penalty, which is a rare instance in match play. I think a lot of times we think about penalties in match play, we just automatically go to loss of hole. But this is a situation where if your opponent moves the ball, that they can put it back, and it would be a 1-stroke penalty. All right, I've got a question here. What happens if another player drives over your ball in a golf cart and then there are tire tracks where the ball was? What happens if you or your teammate run over the ball? Same circumstance. Okay, so this scenario, let's say our ball's in the fairway, it's at rest, and someone drives over it. Okay, in stroke play, if that person is just someone we're playing with, they're an outside agency. There's no penalties to them. And because we're entitled to basically a restoration of our lie. So we're going to pick that ball up and we're going to put it as close as possible to where it was, but in a similar lie to what we had before the cart ran over it. Now, if you yourself ran over your own ball, that would be unfortunate. You're going to be penalized that 1 stroke. And then in order to, you'd have to replace it. And again, you're entitled to that original lie. So you can put it back in an area close to where the ball lies that's most similar. So yeah, make sure you're paying attention to where the ball is going, to where the ball is or where your opponent's ball is. And I got another question. Can you clean the ball when you replace it? Great question. You cannot unless you're on the putting green. So if you accidentally move your ball, if you then go clean it, you're actually going to get penalized for cleaning your ball in a situation where you're not able to clean it. So great question. Good distinction there. What if it's lift clean in place? If it's lift clean in place, then as long as you're in the fairway, you would have to mark your ball though before you pick it up. Make sure that you don't just pick it up without marking that position. Otherwise, you are going to be penalized that 1 stroke. Some other exceptions for when in match play, you get the same as the replacement exception. So if it's conceding or at the player's request, not penalized. If your opponent accidentally marks the ball or lifts it by mistake, thinking it's their own ball, then there's no penalty, and you can put the ball back. And then the same as the player exception. So if your opponent accidentally causes your ball to move on the putting green, there's also no penalty there. It got a question. Is there an exception if you're looking for the ball in the rough and accidentally run over it. I don't want to give the wrong answer here, so I'm going to confirm that, but the rules allow you, if you're in the process of looking and the ball moves, that you're not going to be penalized. As a rules official, if the player says, I was looking for the ball, but they were still in the cart driving around, I think it's going to be difficult to convince a rules official that the action of driving the cart was part of search. But that's a great question. Mr. Hathaway, I'll circle back with you on that. But I don't think that you would be waived from that penalty if you're just driving the cart around and you run over the ball, even if you said you were looking for it. I love the ones that make me think a little bit. That's a good one. I'm going to leave that one there. Okay, outside influence. What the heck is an outside influence? It used to be called an outside agency prior to January 2019, and it's any person, animal, artificial, or natural object. So in the picture there, all those spectators behind Tiger, they're all outside influences. And if they move the ball must be replaced, and there's no penalty to the player. And I've got on here that it does not require the original ball to be found. There's a great video from hole 17 at TPC Sawgrass where the ball is at rest on the putting green and there's a seagull that swoops down and picks the ball up and goes and drops it in the water. Obviously that seagull is an outside agency, right? It's any animal. But that ball, the player is not going to be responsible for going and finding that ball and replacing it. So if with an outside agency has moved the ball so much that it's not able to be retrieved, player can just substitute another ball for it. No penalty. All right, here's our third Minty question here. There's going to be a different 7-number code at the top there. Which of the following is incorrect? Notice I bolded incorrect. We're looking for a false statement regarding movement of the player's ball. There is no penalty. There's no penalty when the player lifts the ball or causes it to move under a rule that allows the ball to be lifted and then replaced on its original spot. B, there is no penalty when the player accidentally causes it, being the ball, to move while trying to find or identify it. Or C, the player gets a penalty for accidentally moving his or her ball in a bunker while taking reasonable actions. I jumped ahead, excuse me. While taking reasonable actions to remove a rake from a bunker. So sorry, I got interrupted on that one. The player gets a penalty for accidentally moving his or her ball in a bunker while taking reasonable actions to remove a rake from the bunker. So I'll give you 10 seconds to answer that one. Maybe read that over again. And let's see what everyone thinks. Okay. Okay, I got a split decision here. So we got 2 votes for A and 2 votes for, 3 and 3. Okay, again, we're looking for which of these statements is false. And in this case, it's going to be C. C is correct. The player gets a penalty for accidentally moving his or her ball in a bunker while taking reasonable actions to remove a rake from the bunker. Remember what a rake is. A rake is a movable obstruction. So the player is not going to be held responsible for movement of the ball in moving a movable obstruction. We're going to be able to place that ball back where it was. That's a good one. All right, and then the last topic here is unplayable ball. So unplayable ball is something that only the player has the ability to decide, sole discretion of the player. And you as a golfer can declare your ball unplayable anywhere on the course except for penalty areas. So if you're in a bunker, if you're on the green, if you're on the teeing ground, or if you're in the general area, basically all areas that aren't those 4 specific areas, you can declare your ball unplayable. It's a 1-stroke penalty, and I've got a diagram that I'm going to pull up with these 3 different relief options. And then there's a bunker relief option as well. But the first diagram here, so my ball's in a bush. I don't think that I can hit it. My 3 options here, one is stroke and distance. So I can go and replay the shot from where I hit it into the bush. Option 2 is that back of the line relief. We've seen that a few times now. Like abnormal ground condition, we're going to draw the line between the hole and where the ball lies, not where it crossed into the bush, because it's not a defined area. So remember, with the penalty areas, you're going to draw the line between the ball, where the ball last crossed the line of the penalty area, and the hole. And in this case, unplayable ball, you're going to draw the line between where the ball physically lies and the hole. And you can go back as far as you want on that line and drop within 1 club length of either side. And then option 3 is you can go 2 club lengths, no nearer the hole in either direction. You can see that diagram there. So depending on why you're declaring your ball unplayable and the situation, you've got these 3 options at your disposal. They're all going to cost you 1 stroke penalty. A great story from, I want to say, I don't know what year it was, but it was in the early 1900s. I believe it was at Myopia Hunt Club, which is a great golf course up in South Hamilton, Massachusetts. They had, I think, 4 of the first 10 US Opens. And the greens there are very sloped and very fast. And this gentleman had a 3-foot putt, I believe it was about 3 feet, above the hole. And he missed the putt, and it rolled all the way down off the green, let's say 30 yards down the hill. Instead of going and trying to get up and down from where he was, he declared his ball unplayable, and he placed it. One of the options under the unplayable ball rule is stroke and distance. So you can replay from where you previously hit your shot. So he placed it back on that spot and hit the 3-footer and made it. So he took his 1-stroke penalty, and then he made the putt instead of going down and trying to get up and down, a much more difficult scenario. So a great example of knowledge of the rules and using it to your advantage. Now, in the unplayable ball in a bunker, we have an additional option here. So we've got the 3 options that we just talked about. We've got the stroke and distance, option number 1. We've got back of the line relief, but you have to drop it in the bunker for 1 stroke. That's option 2. The 2 club lengths on either side, option 3. And then new as of January 2019 is this 4th option, where you can actually drop it outside the bunker on back of the line relief. That is going to cost you 2 shots instead of 1. So you have 2 options for unplayable ball inside the bunker, and 2 options outside. 1 stroke and distance is just that 1-stroke penalty. The back of the line relief outside the bunker is a 2-stroke penalty. So again, going back to that scenario with the abnormal ground condition, where you, instead of taking free relief, you take the 1-stroke penalty and you drop outside the bunker. If you're someone that just doesn't have a lot of confidence in your bunker ability and your ball's plugged, think, hey, I might as well, it's going to take me 2 shots or 3 shots to try and get out of this bunker. I might as well take that back of the line relief and try my chances of hitting over. All right, got it. Great question here. I'm going to read it out loud. Diagram 19.2 or 19.3. Is there an easy way to remember when we have 1 club length or 2 club lengths? Is it safe to say 2 club lengths from where the ball lies, lateral leaf, and 1 club length from a reference point? Great, very common question. In general, if you're, I think that the way you phrased it there is pretty pretty correct. So is it safe to say that 2 club lengths where the ball lies and 1 club length from a reference point? What he means there is, so if you look at option number 3 in this diagram, I'm measuring 2 club lengths from where the ball is physically lying. Whereas on option 2, 4, and 1, I'm measuring 1 club length on either side from a reference point, a point that I have picked out on the golf course. So yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And really the only other common 2 club length scenario is that the lateral option on the penalty area. So I can't think off the top of my head of too many other common issues where you're measuring 2 club lengths. So I think the way you've articulated there, Mr. Gagarin, is a good one. All right, we've got one last Menti question here. So question number 4, again, that's that second code at the top. If a player decides his or her ball in a bunker is unplayable, there are 2 options that require the ball to be dropped in the bunker, and only 1 option that allows relief outside the bunker. True or false? Nice and simple. Give you another 10 seconds to read that one over before I pull the results up. All right, pull up. Oh, got another split. Oh, true takes the lead. Let's see if anybody else wants to answer. So if a player decides his or her ball in a bunker is unplayable, there are 2 options that require the ball to be dropped in the bunker and only 1 option that allows relief outside the bunker. That is false. So if you go back to our diagram, I'll pull it up here. We'll go back to, so if we go back to our diagram, if the question had read, is there only 2 options in the bunker and 1 outside the bunker for 1 penalty stroke, then that would have been true. But it didn't ask about number of penalty strokes. So there's actually 2 options under unplayable that allow you to get outside the bunker and 2 inside the bunker. Whereas that question said 2 inside and 1 outside. So tripped you up there a little bit. But it's great. I take rules quizzes all the time. There's some really good ones. If you just go to usga.org and go under their education tab, they've got rules quizzes that you can customize. You can do, I think it's either 8 or 10, 15, or 25 questions. And there's 3 different levels. They do basic, intermediate, and advanced. And you can either print them out or you can just answer them right there. And if you get them wrong, they will give you the correct answer and they'll give you an explanation or where to find the right rule. So if rules are something that you feel like is interesting to you and you want to learn a little bit more about it or test your skill and feel like, hey, what's my real rules IQ here? Those quizzes are great. Another website that's a good resource is called generalarea.org, all one word, generalarea.org. And there's a lot of those ones I think are not as interactive, meaning you have to print those out and then you can compare it to the answer sheet. Whereas the ones on USGA, you can just click the answer and go from there. But that is everything I got for you this evening. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. Charles Hathaway, I will circle back with you on your question just to make sure I got the right answer. But I believe the way you phrased it, that you would not get an exemption for searching in that scenario. If you have any other questions, please shoot them my way. My email is jmills@ccclub.org. And I look forward to continuing that conversation. We do have a handicap seminar next week. That is at 6 p.m. on Wednesday. Hopefully there is going to be, hopefully you tune in for that one, and we're looking forward to that. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night. I had a question from Bernard Bailey. He said, is the next Q&A section for the new rules discussion, the one we do in February, going to be new or repeat? Based on how few people are signed up for that, I think we're going to do a lot of new stuff. We might cover a couple of similar stuff, but I would definitely tune into that if you tune into this one, because we'll definitely be covering some more rules topics.